ended up blowing the head gasket and a lot more. I also toasted part of the block and the head, so this is just a get me by build. I mean, it's just enough to skim by, quick, dirty, easy, get the engine back in the car and get back out there racing to finish up the season and build a proper one later. So quick, dirty, easy, here we go. Alright guys, this is probably the biggest pain in the ass of doing any of this, and that is the circlips or the wire rings. So lube up both sides of the piston here. Put some nice mollygraph all over the wrist pin and on the inside of the connecting rod here. Alright. Getting the wrist pin completely seated. Make sure she's down inside the groove, and voila. I'm sure you guys will make that look a lot easier than I did. Alright guys, setting ring gap is pretty important. Some people overlook it, but to find out the ring gap, because I'm using a turbo or nitrous application, it's an 86mm bore, which you have to convert to inches in this case, which is 3.386. And because it's a turbo and nitrous application, or should I say turbo application, I'm going to times that by 0.0055s, which equals 0.186. So I'm just going to do a 0.186 feeler gauge to check for the ring gap. If not good, then I'll go ahead and grind her down. So to check ring gap, I just take the piston, slide it in there to make sure that the ring's good and flush and level around the whole bore. I've got my 0.018 feeler gauge, and it will not slide between the groove, so I'm gonna have to grind down a little bit. Got my diamond plated ring filer right here. Just make sure it's all flushed up in the right angle. Just go ahead and grind a little bit off that ring, and then I'll go ahead and fit it again to see if I've got enough taken off. Alright, a little bit of ring filing there. Got my 0.108, and it just slides in between the grooves, so that ring gap is about perfect. CP pistons, I'm actually running a gas nitrated steel top ring, and then this is a THG Napier. Now this Napier ring is really important to install correctly. You can't see it, but it actually has a little notch cut out right here. And if you were to install this upside down, it'll actually pump oil to the top of the cylinder. So yeah, make sure you install this correctly. A lot of them times you'll have like a dot or something on here. This one just so happens that it has the writing on the top. Simple as that. Alright, got all the pistons and the block ready for installation. Got the new rings, everything's laid out, good to go. Cylinders are nice and lubed with some mollygraph, and it's time to get these bad boys in. Alright guys, now that I've got the pistons in, it's time to have it on the other side and go ahead and put the rod bearings in while I've got them exposed.
All my people OG.
Okay, one thing that some people neglect is it's the main stud bolts. They tend to stretch, and the engine has a reputation of being a rod knocker. I ran this engine for 7 years before I finally blew the head gasket, and all the bearings look like they were in good condition, and I've never had an issue with bearing failure in this engine. So one thing that adds a little bit of extra insurance on this whole rod knocking issue or spun bearings is, one, either go ahead and buy new OEM main stud bolts so you know they're not stretched, or upgrade to some ARP main studs. Figured since I'm already in here and I've already reused the bolts once, I'll go ahead and go to the studs. Alright guys, now that I've got the pistons in, it's time to have it on the other side and go ahead and put the rod bearings in while I've got them exposed. Alright guys, ran into a little issue with the ARP main studs. So I didn't do my research, and I found out that when you're torquing down to their 80 foot-pounds, the extra torque can distort the main caps, and it'll change like bearing clearances. So you're actually supposed to get an align bore or hone done when you do the ARP head studs, or sorry, main studs. So they're gonna have to come out, and I would like to reuse my OEM bolts, but you know, there's always an issue of stretching. So I actually got the bolts here and got out my micrometer, and it always seems to stretch down by the threads. And I actually took the micrometer and set it right there at the top, and then I can come down here and it just slides right through like it's nothing when it's really tight up here. So yes, the OEM bolts are stretched and definitely not worth risking using for the build. So I overnighted some OEM units, got brand new bolts and washers. So out with these studs. Alright, it's time for the rear main. One thing I learned in the automotive industry, at least they say that one of the main reasons why replacement main seals fail is improper lubrication during installation. I noticed that the OEM ones actually come with a nice, like, I'm guessing a Mollygraph lube already in the seal, but I've sold a lot at, when I worked at an auto parts store, that was just completely dry. Alright guys, before we can put the front cover or oil pan or anything like that on, first we need to get the timing chain going on. Alright, on our timing chain we have 3 little marks. We actually have 2 silver links and a gold link. I want to put it on here, and there's a little dot right here on the crank sprocket. You want to put the gold link right on that one. Alright, one thing I'm always paranoid about is dropping this chain down the front cover after I get the pan on and whatnot. So I just zip tie it right to the guide. Alright, it's an S13 red top, but I went and got the S14 oil pickup tube just because it's, you know, more high flow and better pickup. Alright, I'm sure as you guys know, SR20s have a bad reputation of rod knock. And I think it's more of like an issue with a user problem than the actual engine. A few things that you can do is, one, make sure you're using good oil with a good film protection and keep it fresh. If you're going to race, I mean, it's a little bit of extra insurance to just replace the oil after every race, just to make sure. But the S14 oil pickup is a good upgrade over the S13. It's got a much larger intake on it. Improved baffling can be nice, but I think a big part of it is the oil pan. A lot of people run like the stock oil pan. Sometimes it's dented and it can mess up with the pickup, but oil starvation or picking up air, it only takes a second to really mess up bearings. So I originally wanted to go with the Canton Racing oil pan. It's an amazing design. It's sheet metal fabricated. It's got 4 trap doors in it. And it really just centers the oil right in the pickup. But I got one from them and it leaked. I got another one and it leaked, and they swear up and down it wasn't them, but whatever, bygones be bygones. I went with this Gretty one. I haven't had any oil starvation issues whatsoever, and it seals up and never leaks, so win-win situation. Time to get the flywheel on there. So I've ran spec clutches on this engine for the last 7 years with great results. Back when it was really mild, I ran just like a spec stage 1, because rule of thumb is that the lower the stage and less aggressive the clutch is, the longer it's going to last. And I'm all about longevity, time attack, circuit racing. I'm not doing clutch kicks or harsh engagement, just on and off. So when I upped the power for the engine, I wanted a little more clamping force, so I opted into this spec stage 3. It's a center coppered puck on one side, which gives it really good clamping force, and then it's like Kevlar full backing on the other side. So smooth engagement, but great holding power. I've never had it slip, even when I was pushing 365 wheel horsepower, which is my tuner says close to 450 at the flywheel. So that's him, not me. Just for easy access, I think I'm just going to go ahead and throw the block in the engine bay and then assemble the rest of it in there, just because I'm so cramped. And hey, I mean, it's that poor life. Got the engine inside the car for the most part, but I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about the head gasket selection here. So I was originally running an Apexi, which I think is probably one of the best head gaskets around. So you can see this is the Apexi 87 1.1 millimeter. But what's really nice about this one is that it's got a full fire ring that goes all the way around the cylinder. As you can see, the entire thing. So that is a really nice feature when it comes to a head gasket. Now, I was told about this is a Power Enterprise head gasket, and this one also has a fire ring that goes all the way around the cylinder, completely sealing in the compression gases, and then this embossment right here that does some more sealing. So I really wanted to go with this one, but because I had to take so much off the block in the head, that the 1.5 millimeter isn't quite enough to get my compression back where I wanted to be. So I came across this Tomei, which is a 1.8 millimeter. Now the Tomei head gasket is pretty impressive as well. It doesn't have the fire ring all the way around it, but it's considered a stopper head gasket. It's kind of a lot like what HKS does. So inside that center layer, there is actually a piece of metal that comes out in a layer and then wraps back around, and it's the stopper. So when this is torqued down, it actually smashes down on this ring on the inside and seals it, along with the embossment that's all the way around it, adding this spring effect, helping it seal. So I think this head gasket will definitely do the trick. Another subject I'd like to talk about is what kind of head studs I prefer. A lot of guys like ARP. I'm more of a Mosworks kind of guy. So one thing that I noticed about the ARP head studs is that they don't bottom out all the way in the block, and kind of the point of using a stud is that it bottoms out so it won't put any pressure on the threads. So ARP just kind of has a stud that just stops bluntly. When you look at the Moswork one, you can see that it's got a machined end to it that'll actually fit all the way to the bottom of the block. That way this thing seats all the way down and it can't, you know, be pulled out. So I personally think this is a way better stud over the ARP unit. Guys, time to put some accessories on, some of the boring stuff. Bear with me. All right, getting ready to put the lifters back in, and it's time to bleed them. I got my fresh oil right here. Grab one of these lifters right here, and I get a Allen wrench that will fit in the hole like so. Submerge it in oil, which that is not enough oil. And then just put it in there. Should be a little soft spot to push on. Up there it goes. Oh, and just pump her up and down. Got a few air bubbles out of that one. And then I'll take it directly out of the oil and put it in the head. So yeah, I got all the lobes completely lubed up with a good high pressure moly graph and the rocker arms and all the journals, camshaft journals there. So now there's going to be both a mark on the cam gear and on the chain to line it up in the proper configuration. Take out my little safety net here. Alright, so looking at the gear, there's a little dot right there on the gear. If I look here on the chain, there's a silver link right there. So the silver link needs to go on that mark. Alright, I put all this stuff on here as like a safety thing. Saw a guy that dropped the chain down in the bottom of his engine and it was a huge mess. Alright, so silver link on that mark. Oh, don't mind that, guys. Okay. Nope, off one. There we go. Silver link on the mark. I've got my big mess here. Got our exhaust cam and get my engine lube. Boom. Boop. There we go. Silver link with the mark. Silver link with the mark. Good to go. Time to put some bearing caps on this thing. Alright, one more part I decided to go with was the Mazworks timing chain tensioner. Just figured, you know, why not? You have it open, so might as well throw one in, make sure it's just a little bit extra insurance. I'm also a cheap ass and I didn't buy a new gasket, so it looks like I'm using a little bit of this. So I've looked at the user manual, and you can actually measure the deflection on the chain, and then watching other guys build them, they just kind of grab it and you have so much slack, and they say that's good. So I'll go ahead and roll with that, tighten down the nut, and move on to the next step. The last steps of the build, or the refresh, is putting in the distributor. So as you see, we have the marks lined up with the shiny on the link, mark right there. Little cheat sheet is that this pin is pointing straight up. Got the crank down on top dead center right there. And if you look right here, there is a mark right here on the housing, and there's two marks on the gear. There's a little yellow mark, which I think is supposed to be white, and then there's a mark right up there. And you line that further mark up with the one on the housing, and when you put it in the head, it should rotate, and that white or yellow mark should be lined up with the housing, and it means you're dead on. Alright, everything's top dead center. You can see I've got that mark right there along with the housing, and then the yellow or white mark. I'm going to try to keep these mounting tabs lined up with the holes as I stick it in there. Alright. Alright, you probably can't see that in there, but those tabs are lined up. Everything looks good. Distributor's in, ready to rock. Or crank angle sensor. Alright. Throw a valve cover on this thing to keep the dirt out while I finish everything else up. And voila. Now this isn't like a really nice rebuild by any means. This is just a cheap, dirty refresh to get me back on the track. I mean, I blew the engine, still have like 2 or 3 races I like to go to, so this was just a wham bam, thank you ma'am, throw some bearings in it, new piston, new rings, and make it last long enough to get me out there for the season. And then for maybe the off season, I'll go ahead and build a proper SR20. So I don't know, man, I hope you guys liked it. Hope we can help you out quick and easy. Thanks guys.